What's up, guys? Welcome back to the JP Podcast. Today we have Bobby Hulme-Lippert. I said it right?
You got it.
So wife's last name, Bobby's last name put together. Awesome. Book right here, by the way. I have not got, I'm so interested to read this. I'm going to tell you why here. Small Stories About Big Things, a collection of essays. And Bobby, chaplain, then pastor, now leadership expert, right, and coach. Did I get that right?
Yeah, leadership coach, speaker. Yep, 100%.
Yes. And what's awesome, we recently, like I mentioned to you, I've just been studying people when they speak, and there's the listening to what they're saying, and then there's the watching what's happening. And lately, my mind's been able to just identify how much more the best people speak through stories. And so the fact that this is like your book and you took your stories similar to like stories in the Bible that you would speak on, you said as a pastor.
That's right.
And now just made stories and lessons to teach leadership through stories. I think that's how we've passed on all of our history through stories. So what inspired you to write this?
This was a book that began kind of mid-pandemic, and I wanted a different kind of creative outlet. I was like, I'm writing stories in some ways every week as part of my sermons and incorporating that. I'd learned that that's what helped land the most for people. As much as I tried to make really insightful, important points, the stories were what really held it for people. And so I thought I want to start writing stories just outside the sermon writing that really capture a lot of the gospel or good news values, but maybe for people that don't necessarily walk through the doors of a church.
Yeah.
These are just everyday stories that happen to me or right around me, so they're all my stories, and they illuminate some kind of bigger point, and they're purposely just a bridge to just a wider audience, because I think we're hungry for connection, for meaning. And stories, as simple as they sound, they really are this bridge that just hits on so many levels at once and provide that gift that we're hungering
for sure. So let's go back a little bit. So you grew up in Ohio.
That's right.
You went to church in college in North Carolina.
That's right.
That's where you met your wife.
Yep.
And and then you went into being a chaplain?
So I was in Army ROTC.
You said that.
Which is a program that you'll serve as an officer when you graduate. And long story short, I thought maybe I'll serve as a chaplain. I'd been a leader in the church my whole life, and so the next step was to go to seminary actually before jumping right into the chaplaincy. But
okay, so you grew up in church.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sometimes I meet people that grew up in church and they're like, this is the last thing I'm doing, and they go away, then they come back. But you didn't have that experience.
I'm not the prodigal son. I'm the son that stayed home and need to learn how to party.
Okay.
and embrace the joy of the Father's house eventually.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think I'm more the prodigal son.
Okay.
And so, trying to never left, but just definitely getting closer to God at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I remember I went to church and the pastor said, "How can you lead your household if you don't know God's word? How are you going to lead it?"
Okay.
What are you basing it off of? And I was 37 years old, and I was like, I don't really know the Bible like that. I would open it up and like, what does God want to tell me today? Okay. And I was like, you can't. And this was the transformative moment in my life. It was having my son and saying, I'm going to be responsible for teaching him God's word, and how can I teach him what I don't know? Yeah. And that took me on a journey to read the Bible and get closer to God, and it's been amazing. So, what was being a chaplain like in the military, working with soldiers? I think that's got to be tough, especially when people have gone through loss. Like, They need that spiritual connection. Can you share what that's like? We've never had a chaplain on the show.
I'll tell you an experience that may give a little taste.
Okay.
I'll say it was strange. I never deployed, even though I served during a time when we were in 2 wars and deployments were everywhere. But I did serve at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio as a chaplain. And inevitably, soldiers would be coming back and in pretty rough condition and be dealing with all the things of what their life was going to be like now with this injury or these realities. And as a young chaplain, I would sit there and I had no idea what to say. Like, what do you say? How do you pray? And I started to learn if I listened long enough and just asked a question or two, that soldier would start to tell a story. And I learned that I could help them hear their own story. And that at the end of the time, they found a measure of almost healing within. Not that there wasn't a long road ahead, just by being able to discover where they are in their own story, by even providing a narrative. As a chaplain, that's really what I discovered was, wow, if I can help people understand where they are in their story and just give a name to it instead of it being an ambiguous, terrifying thing, something changes. And that was maybe the most profound lesson out of the whole chaplaincy, was the gift of helping people discover their story.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That you were present enough to listen, because I feel like sometimes we feel like we got to give advice.
Okay, yeah. I felt that way. I was like, I need 10 good scripture verses, and I could pull one, and here's your advice for the day.
Yeah.
And I never used that piece of paper because I pretty quickly discovered that wasn't.
I think that's also what people fight with faith, though, too, because people just like, here's a verse, and just, and God's gonna, and it's like, hey, man, like I just need you to be a person, and that is being godly, or that is being kind, or that is loving people.
Yes.
So, good for you being present enough. People, I think like that. Sometimes people don't know what to say. We had the gentleman from Self-Parenting, Dan Hagedorn. How do I say it? Hagedorn, yes. He was on here, and he's a teacher and wrote like a self-parenting guide, him and his wife, Vicky. Just amazing people. And we talked about trauma, and he was like, I was like, so when somebody goes through stuff like, and you don't know what to say, what do you say? And they went through this series of like things you don't say that you shouldn't say that people say. And I'm like, so what do you say then? What's the right thing to say? And he said, sometimes you just need to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. And that was, to your point, that's like what you did for these soldiers that are people like, man, I feel bad for that person, or man, I don't even know what to say. Let me just not be in that zone. And you were there to just be there for them.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Good for you, man.
And it proved, I for a while I was like, I felt strange. I felt a little bit bad that I never deployed. I didn't know what to do with that. I'm watching all my peers deploy. But I'll tell you, I ended up serving as a Presbyterian pastor in these congregations with a lot of older folks, World War II vets. And I would end up doing their services, their memorial services. And I discovered that the most healing and helpful thing was sitting with that family a week before the service and listening to the stories of that person who's just passed. And then I would, from the pulpit, be able to tell some of that story and the way the light of Christ shined through that person. And I realized, wow, one of the gifts the chaplaincy gave me was, no, I never deployed and served all the soldiers overseas, but I ended up serving a lot of the veterans by learning how important it was to tell their story in a way that again, talked about the way that the light of Christ shined through them. So that proved a real gift to learn some of that story piece.
Yeah, not everybody's like that. There's this point that that people that have a gift don't think it's a gift.
Yes.
Because they're like, it just
you
comes.
You can't see it.
It just comes easy. Like, no, I'm not that special. This is like, no, you don't understand, dude. You are special because everybody can talk, but few can listen.
Yeah.
So okay. So then you become a pastor.
That's right. I was a Presbyterian pastor for a good while, and that was the church I grew up in. I grew up in the Presbyterian Church in Cincinnati, Ohio.
I'm sorry, but I don't know what Presbyterian is. Like, I think I go to a non-denominational church.
Oh.
Can you break that down, just so I know?
There are a couple things. It is the Bible is front and center as a key. So the pulpits are usually raised in a Presbyterian sanctuary to visually make that clear, the importance of Scripture. Presbyterian refers to a type of government where there's a bunch of elders elected to govern the church. It's not like the pastor says go and we all go. Well, no, there's a bunch of elders who help discern the will of God collectively.
Okay.
So that's distinct from some traditions, but
okay, I appreciate
it's a main line. Like, we've got Methodists, we've got Baptists, we've got Presbyterians, Episcopalians. We could go into all that, but fundamentally, I was serving churches in Atlanta, Richmond, and here in Texas that have all gone through the the heyday post World War II in terms of growth and all of that, and are trying to discover a new faithful way forward when going and being a part of a church is not as natural an assumption as it was maybe a generation ago.
Did you see that as a pastor, being a pastor? Because some people are like, church is in decline.
Yep.
And some are like, no, there's a revival taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that there was a decline in church? Do you see that in society today, that less people go to church? What's your experience being a pastor?
I definitely saw both. As a pastor, I actually was invigorated by the fact that this was a challenge that invited a new level of creativity. Like, okay, God, what's the new thing we can try here? How can we meaningfully connect and love and serve if the old paradigm's not working? I will say one of the most, and I didn't mean for this to happen, I gave a sermon on Jesus, and when he talks about you can't put new wine into an old wineskin. You can't put something new and good into kind of an old container. It blows up. And I started talking about, I think the Spirit of God is at work in our culture, in our society, in some significant and big ways that are not ways that look like the traditional church, the old wineskin. And I gave this sermon, it's been 2-3 years at this point, and the congregation comes up to me afterwards, and they go, "Whew, boy, you're really feeling it today, Pastor." And I was like, I was? And they were, yeah. And I was like, I guess, yeah. I guess I really do feel this thing that I see the Spirit of God alive in all these different pockets that we don't necessarily call church all the time, but there is a kind of grassroots revival that's going on in all these little pockets that, again, are not necessarily the old school building that you associate with it.
Yeah. I think because of, technology today, you can get your fix or your so much. And that while people are busier than ever, they're also more empty. And I've seen that for myself. We're just, people are busy. And so to have good relationships, right? It's less and less and less as technology advances. I think people become more independent of one another.
I'm curious, what helps you not or be less busy or more present? I think that is one of the crux of one of the more challenging issues of our time.
I think what you just said, not be less busy but more present, is very powerful the way that you said it. So thank you for catching that. Because sometimes we'll say that and they're like, yeah, and then my guys are like, that's why I got to slow down. But you're running a business is like, oh, you can't slow down. Or you're running a church, like you can't slow down, but you got to be more present. I would say that it's helped. It's gotten better as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
It's definitely, when I started, I was really young, trying to build a business, make some money, take care of my family, and do all these things. As I've gotten older, you realize, like, what are the things that really matter the most? And I want to say it probably happened the most when I lost everything. There was a time in my life where I lost everything, lost over $1 million, like business wasn't doing good. And I tell this whole story. I'm at my friend's house. There's a house we're building. It's not done. So I'm at this house. Things are going wrong. This business partner mismanaged $1 million. There's a Ferrari outside, but like just stress and chaos every single day to finish all these projects, make this right. And I'm going running that night, and I can't see this tree that just got trimmed. And for some reason, the branch was like a spear. And so it hits me in the head. I'm like, like I freak out, and I'm like, man, I'm sweating a lot, and it ends up being like blood.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm bleeding. I go into the house, and the dog, this dude's dog, good buddy of mine, threw up. I'm stepping in throw up, and it was like this moment of like everything was wrong. I'm bleeding. I'm in throw up. I owe all kinds of money. I've lost my savings, and chaos is happening. And I'm just like, I'm gonna cry and I'm gonna laugh, and I did a little bit of both. And I was like, God, you're so funny. You're so funny, because I identified with who I am, with my money, my success, my edification, my business, my assets, my this, my peace, my financial peace. And I had none of that. And I was like, the question was, who are you when you have nothing? And that's who you are. That's really who you are. And at that moment, those people that were like, they were supporting me, I started having like some really good friends. I've had good friends and great mentors. But I had some really good friends that I'm like, man, I went through such pain that I realized empathy. I was like, man, because I'm going through this, I feel other people's pain more. And I think I started to become more aware of being empathetic. Not that I wasn't, but just being busy, and I think that a lot of us care, but we're just busy. So I think experiencing pain and going through life, you start to realize how much you need another person. Yeah. And then I think the second phase of that is wisdom. I'm 38, 2 kiddos, another one on the way. And I'm looking for men in my life that I'm like, okay, what don't I know? What are the mistakes? What advice would you give me? What perspective? Hey, I'm doing this. What are your thoughts? And before I was afraid because of getting that feedback because maybe I could be wrong.
Yeah. And
now it's more so, hey, if I'm wrong, that's okay. I'm okay being wrong. And if I don't get the feedback, I won't know that I'm wrong. And then that's going to lead to a bigger mistake. So I think more relationships with people, more processing. And then the last thing, I was just at a meeting with a friend of mine named Andy Elliott, and he was like, the reason that I beat most people is I am where I am. And he's like, I'm just present. And I experienced that. Like when you're having a conversation, like you are the most important person in the world. Yeah. And like when you feel that, when you feel what it feels to be that for someone else, and then you're aware of, okay, this is what presence feels like, then you want to make other people feel that way. So for me, it's various different things. How about you, by the way? How do you deal with being more present?
A couple thoughts. One, I just love that your story at its most empty is also so full. I find that tears and laughter are often expressions of our soul. And I just love that this came right to the fore at this profoundly low point, which sounds just like God. Which, anyway, it's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
I actually find the paradox of slowing down and being present has an expansive effect on time. When I like to do my coaching on hiking.
Can you say that one more time?
When we slow down and get present, it actually has an expansive effect on time. In other words, when I've been present with a person, or I've had a space of prayer, or I practice yoga or different things, and I say, I don't have time for this, I don't have time, but I do it. And I come out of it. I still have the same 24 things to do that day. And yet my feeling about them is like, we're good. We're great. and that's what I find what I was getting at is when I do my coaching on hiking trails, which I love to do for folks who are local. A lot of times I can tell people arrive and they're like, I don't know if I really had time to do the meeting today. I can tell their energy. And then we get going on the trails and it's like, finally they got outside the thing they've been inside all day, and the scales are melting away. They're slowing down. They're making connections because I think almost the nature and creation is so connected and it's almost unconsciously feeding connections to us. It's awesome. And then you enjoy this space of presence for an hour or so and you're just like, oh, everything now feels so much more expansive. And that to me is the beautiful paradox of risking presence, of risking a different pace.
That's so good. Because it goes opposite to what people believe.
Yeah, like how can I slow down?
Yeah, are you kidding me?
Everything's gonna get worse.
Yeah. By the way, I've experienced just in the time because this is episode 16. We haven't done like a lot, but 16, and I've had different guests.
Come on, yeah.
Yeah, the way you listen, I see why as a chaplain. People were able to connect with you. Yeah.
Thanks, George.
I mean it, Bobby, sincerely. I got a lot of questions, but okay. Hardest thing about being a pastor. I know that wasn't on what Shane sent you, but we're gonna have a few that we're not on that.
Hardest thing about being a pastor is there is a 24/7 reality to it that a number of professions have. Don't get me wrong. You're always on call for the hospital visit, the last minute meeting because there's a fire going on at the church. There's literal water main break in the church building. These are all just like norms that just come up all the time. And so the pastor, that idea of just needing to be present all the time. And so how then to truly prioritize your family, how to prioritize your own well-being when you can just keep giving, because that's what a pastor is supposed to do, is give, is show up, is be there, is
sacrifice.
The cross is in the center of the sanctuary, because remember, we're a people of sacrifice, and the pastor surely is that. And that's not bad. There's something good about that, but the constancy of that, and then of course you do that, and there's not many outlets just to say, hey, this is hard, because people come to you as a pastor and say, life's hard, and I welcome that. I love being present for that, but I can't go back to you and say, by the way, it's hard for me because you're not my pastor. And it is a little different. I felt like I knew people at incredible depth, and yet they weren't most of them quite friend, right? There's still pastor and congregant, and there's a difference. And so finding those spaces of friendship as a pastor who you think knows everybody and must have thousands of friends, just a handful, and that's only if you're very intentional. And so I found that to be one of the harder parts, to quiet behind the scenes, is how to really find that space for friendship and connection with people who understand that.
How does a pastor or leader or anybody that's balanced the call, or the business or the church, their family, and their own sanity? What helped you do it?
Yes, going back to that thing, when you're willing to slow down and be present, it has an expansive effect. Okay. So I was fortunate enough in Atlanta, where I served in a church, in Richmond, Virginia, where I served in a church, and a little bit in Texas, where I served, to be invited into a little pastor group, and it was simply a matter of showing up every other week to the group. That and that little accountability, that I never had time to show up for the group, and yet I would get there. And those folks would just be such a beautiful presence to me, and they'd had an expansive effect. So that was one of the anchoring things.
Was this another group of pastors, or was it just a group?
This was a group of pastors.
Okay, got it.
And I think it's the same for leaders. I think leaders, a lot of people do not know the journey of leadership till you're in it. And you got to find your people, and just know that no matter how busy you are, that's an expansive, that's going to actually add to your sense of energy if you keep showing up for and with those people. And then I always counsel, find your creative outlet. That's where I first discovered writing, was midway through my pastoring. I started attending writing classes on the side on my kind of one day off. And that's not for everybody, but yeah, it was for me. That was just this creative space that I needed. And I find the clients I work with, they'll start picking up painting again. They'll start picking up martial arts. They'll start picking up something that they had let go of, because they realize that's not just a side gig when you have time. That's fundamental to the energy and creativity you bring. Yeah,
to your mental health as well, and your spirit. I was talking. I went and met with one of my friends, Mike Pierce, invited me or referred me to one of the top realtors here in Austin, and so we go have lunch and we're talking, and he's like, "Yeah, I love to paint." And I'm like, I'm so confused. I'm like, what's going on? I'm trying to get business advice, how'd you become the number one realtor? How do you guys, community, can we network? And he's like, yeah, let me show you my paintings. I'm like, and he's like, George, listen, he's like, I got to have a space where I can go be creative and just unwind. And this is the way that I do it. Other people do it in different ways. But I thought it was so interesting that this multi-millionaire is, painting on the side. And I'm like, when do you have time to paint? But that's the difference, is it gives you more time. It makes you more present.
That's right. I have this one client we've been working, and they say, what I want to do is I want to bring the river into my workplace. The river is their place where they sense a sense of just peace and connection, creativity. Like, I want to bring the river into the workplace. And I find that's actually the work of most people. They want to bring that painting space, that river space, that whatever that other space is, and they know that if they just honor it, more and more, that sense, no matter how crazy work is, how stressful work is, they are starting to come from a different place. It's really powerful.
That's cool. That's really cool. So, okay, so you're a pastor, you're building churches.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you feel like this call, like, man, I got to go work with leaders. I got to go build leaders. I got to get into writing. I got to get into leadership training. I got to get into working with teams. That's got to be, I don't know. I would assume that that's got to be hard.
Yes.
Because it's like, this is like, so was that like, hey man, I feel like God, I fulfilled my mission.
Yeah.
Was that like a lot of prayer? What called you? You know, I would assume it's like the same thing for like a business owner saying, I built this massive business and now I'm at the next chapter of my life, but it's like, but dude, this is my baby or my business or my calling. Like, What was that transition like for you?
Like leaving the only home I've known to risk another one that God was providing. And what I mean by that, it started in late 2019 when my mom died of brain cancer.
Wow.
And then just a little bit later, right, pandemic. And both of those shook me at a soul level that started asking those questions about like, wow, what am I doing with my time here on earth? I mean, I'm a pastor, it's a great calling and all that, but it just shook me and said, no day is guaranteed. And even though I've been preaching on these things for years, it was different after mom and the pandemic. And so for 2 years with, wise mentors, a spiritual director, a coach, a lot of important people in my life, I just kept discerning what's going on. And for a while, I reframed how I understood my approach to pastoring. I tried some things. It was good. But eventually I realized I sense I actually need to risk leaving the only home I've known. I was a leader in the Presbyterian church since I was in youth group, right? I was just one of those kids. And I'm going to step into the wilderness of this next chapter because I do believe God wants to use my gifts for connecting and speaking among people that may not necessarily walk through the doors of the church. And which sounds bold and amazing, and okay, we step into letting go. And of course, I had some space to do that because my wife works full time, and so okay, good. We're not just dropping everything and suddenly wondering how we have some kind of income. But it's been a wild ride. I'd be happy to speak to it, but honestly, the image that comes to mind is it was a year ago. Our then 3-year-old was jumping in a muddy puddle in Cincinnati, Ohio. We were visiting family. It's an icy, muddy puddle. He's jumping up and down in his white tennis shoes, and he gets stuck in the mud. And so we have to pull him out, and he's like, and he's cold and muddy and messy. And I'm like, this feels like what it's like to step into the entrepreneurial journey. It feels like you're on a trail and you're going to the great adventure and you're going to do a new thing, and you are. It's exciting. But also, like, you just step in muddy puddles where you're like, how do we get stuck here? And how are we going to keep moving forward? But as a person of faith, we know the mud's where the mud's the soil. The mud's where the plants, the seeds getting planted. But so all to say, it's been a journey. It's an adventure. It's not an easy one, but it's the right one.
Interesting. So I'll share a funny story, and then I'm gonna ask. Like, I think it's a tough question in my opinion. We're in Paris, and my family's inside the house. I'm outside because I'm going to. My sister booked this. I love my sister Jen. She booked this Airbnb. Great deal. Such a great deal that it's so far from a train that there's Uber won't show up to your place to pick you up. Okay, so we're in Paris. We can't get an Uber. I'm like, I got to go find a train. So I go out there early, and I'm just praying.
Yeah.
And I had a moment. I went like, God, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And I'm looking around the neighborhood, and all of a sudden I start. It smells like crap. It smells like dog. And I look down. And I've been stepping in a pile of dog poop the entire time while I'm asking myself, what's my purpose? And it's like, what a story, dude. I'm like, that's funny. Pay attention. Be where you are.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's rich.
So I think I got to sit there and really take away the outcome of what that story really meant. But I just thought it was just a funny story at that moment. Okay. So this is tough for me. you have this pastor calling, you want to go into like leadership coaching. When you put these on a scale, like to some people, they'd be like, no, pastoring is more important than that. This is a greater purpose. You're making it's more significant. You're changing more people's lives. Like, how do you battle that from where it's like, well, I'm not quitting on this mission. Yeah. But other people will maybe look like you're quitting or you're stepping down. Like, did you deal with that? Did you deal with any kind of like fear? I'm sure you dealt with fear. Did you deal with like guilt? Did you deal with shame? Did you deal with, am I making the right decision? Like, what was that like for you? Mainly, and you may have already answered it.
No, mainly, I'll say two things. Mainly fear of what other people would think. I have a people-pleasing tendency. I want people to like me, and I had to face the fear of what other people would say. What do you mean you're leaving the known for such a significant unknown? And hey, you showed up to this congregation and said you were going to serve, and you've served some, but they probably expected to serve a little longer. And all the different things, and what are people going to say? What are people going to say? What are people going to think? But the thing about pastoring in some traditions is the longer you go, the more you take on the administrative responsibilities of literally the building, the budget, the programming. And it can be difficult to get back to the people. This, as a coach, in some ways, I've experienced that I'm doing some of my most profound ministry ever.
Wow.
Because I'm going back to the Jesus model, 1 with 3, 1 with 12. And again, this paradox that there's a great expansiveness that happens 1-on-1, 1 with 2, 1 with 3, that you think, no, you want 1 with 1,000. And sure, I speak to groups, I love that. But there's a multiplication that happens when there's a depth. And that's what I love about coaching.
I think that's also a paradox because we think the more people that we're talking to, the more impact that we're making.
Right.
Because naturally there's more people hearing the message, so you hope that that's the case. But to have sometimes a smaller group, how you can make a big impact with a smaller group.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm enjoying.
Was there any part of that you had to, like, man, am I quitting or and I maybe I'm not even going to ask this question right. Am I quitting or am I really answering to this other passion of mine? But am I quitting to answer this passion? Like, did that question make sense at all?
Yeah, there was some sense of guilt. Like, am I living up to this expectation that others had for how long I would serve and how I would serve in this pastoring of this particular church? But fortunately, honestly, the call, the draw to risk something different just continued to outweigh it. And that was telling for me to discover that there was a real energy that I could not deny that just kept growing bigger than all the fears and guilts and second guessing I could do.
Got it.
Yeah.
So how was it transition? Was it I love you guys. This is coming. I'm going to give you X amount of time, and then this is my day? Or was it, hey, you know what? Let me start doing some of this on the side, kind of building it up, and then, this is here, and it goes like this.
Yes.
What was your transition?
For a while, I thought I would just reframe how I was as a pastor. And so I started speaking more in the community. I wanted to speak more in the community and be out and about a little more. So I'd already started doing that on the side, just around the Austin, Georgetown, Texas area.
How did you start speaking in the community? You volunteered? You told people this is what I do? People started reaching out to you? What was that first speaking event? Like how?
I just started mentioning if I was involved in the local chamber of commerce.
Okay.
That, hey, if you ever need a speaker, I speak on leadership.
Oh, okay.
I've done tons of Sunday school classes and all the rest on it, and I knew how to translate that. No, this was not going to be a church message, just leadership. Certainly principles, if you're from a church, you'd recognize servant leadership kind of things.
Correct.
And the chamber one day called. They said, oh my gosh, our speaker just canceled. We are trying to find someone within 24 hours. Can you do it? And I said, yes. And that went well. And then a couple other, it was really, chambers, a couple Rotary clubs, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But again, just on the side, but that wasn't purposely like, oh, and I'm going to build this thing and then leave the pastoring. Eventually, when the time came to make the shift, I realized I did not have the time and energy to try to build the next thing while giving the full heart devotion that pastoring requires. I was going to have to let go of it.
Yeah.
And that took formally about a month. I let the leadership know, and you really don't want more than a month gap, because it's just, that transition needs to happen.
Yeah.
The goodbyes need to happen, but every conversation becomes a goodbye, so it can't go on forever. And, it was about formally, overtly a month, and then I was out into the wilderness, and I gave myself a good, really couple months to just have some family time, some decompression, some discernment, and then I started with my own coach building the business.
And so how was that? Was you started coaching your business, your coaching business?
Yes.
What was that like? How did you start acquiring clients? How was that experience? How did you know even what to? Obviously, you know leadership, but how did you know to like how to coach people? Was it from the counseling that you did with people through ministry, or did you go study how to coach people? Did you say, you know what, let me get my thoughts together and come up with like a coaching program, or how'd you start?
It's a great question. I did, as a pastor, I got what's called a doctor of ministry, and my focus was on studying small groups and how people change. So I had certainly studied a lot of that, and I'd done a lot of counseling. I actually think, and a lot of active listening and how people can change just by the kind of presence you provide them. But I will tell you, my core coaching conviction is that clarity is the reward, not the requirement.
Okay, clarity
is the reward, not the requirement. So when we move forward on something, what's it going to look like? What's it going to be like? We want clarity. We want clarity.
You want certainty, yeah.
Want
clarity, yeah.
What the better way, the harder way, the way of faith is to step with an action forward, and you will discover as your reward new clarity.
Wow, that's really good.
So my point is, I had a big launch event for my coaching. And I had a system. I built a system I thought was solid based on my experience, my studies, all the things. But had it been tried in this way? No. But I knew the only way was to step, action, launch event, and discover new clarity about what's working and what's not. And I was amazed to see that my initial group of clients all came from people I'd somehow connected through my church days, because coaching's so much about trust. It's so relational. And so that's where that started. And I started iterating on this process I'd come up with about how to help people really discover what they're about. If there's a quote that anchors my coaching, it's from Howard Thurman, this 20th century theologian, who said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs are people who've come alive."
That's so good, man.
And that's what I'm trying to do.
So good.
But how to do that is an art.
Okay, I got to stop because I got like already 4 questions, and we're going to come right back to how to do that as an art, because that's part of it.
Go ahead.
So say that one more time. So clarity is the reward, not the requirement. I'm going to remember that. That's locked in. So that's great. I'm gonna use that as long as I'm on this planet. That was really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I try to find one nugget in every single podcast I can like apply to my life, teach to my kids. That was really powerful, because I'm a very structured person. So like I want a map.
Same. Yeah.
I want to know. I want to know like all the things that can go wrong, and then I want to know what are all the steps if something goes wrong, and then I want to weigh those steps, and then I want to order them from,
That's right. That's right.
So for me, I'm like, dude, I need this answer, but that's not how I built my business. That's not how we got.
You look back, you realize
it wasn't. It was just show up and what can I do? Let me do something. Oh, that taught me. Oh, that doesn't work. But it's funny because sometimes we forget those things.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something?
No.
Okay. Can you repeat your favorite quote from
Howard Thurman? Yeah. Don't ask what the world needs.
Don't ask what the world needs.
Ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs are people who've come alive.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And for you, what makes you come alive?
It is in part seeing others discover their spark and being part of that.
Okay.
Being attentive in a way that draws that out into the aha moments. Oh, I love it in coaching. I love it in speaking. My speaking is very facilitation oriented, interactive, because I love opening space for the aha. that breaks through. We come with so many layers about who to trust, who not to trust, all the different things, and to let a story, let a way of being, a way of listening open up for an aha that's right under there. That gives me so much joy. And so whether that's, again, writing, speaking, coaching, the outlets differ for me personally, but I just live for that aha that is another way to put it, the Holy Spirit at work in someone's life.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love how you give the credit there. The other night, I'm sitting there in my bed, and I'm thinking about things, and I realize how much I'm thinking about myself.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm like, you really got close to God, George, when things were going wrong in your life. And now that things are going right, you're starting to drift. Do you need to lose everything to be close to God? And then I start questioning that, and I'm like, okay, so do I only get close to God when I need things? So do I use God? And it went through, if you need to experience that to learn that lesson again, then I'll let you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go through that lesson again. I just need to be more present of what really matters. And this morning, I'm trying to pray to God. And my brain keeps going back to like my to-do list. And my brain keeps going back to me. And my brain keeps going back to all these things. And the verse of the day for me this morning was, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm like, okay, mm-hmm. God wants us to be abundant, to be wealthy, to have great lives. Yeah. But it's really what you treasure, and when the wealth becomes a treasure versus God, mm-hmm. That's where that, the love of money and the root of all evil and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So like what you just said, like when I can help that person have that aha moment, but that's really Christ.
Yeah.
You don't take the credit for it, but you let him use you to help you, and then you just gave him the credit. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful.
That's grace. The aha moments are grace of God. I'll add, you said I was closest to God when I was at the low parts, and I thought to your other story, I was like, so you're saying that you had your deepest clarity of purpose was when you were in the poop.
Yeah. Yeah. Some reason when I step in pee or I step in poop or I keep stepping in a animal.
Amazing.
So, okay, we gotta,
go ahead.
We gotta, for time's sake, because I know you have a coaching meeting, and I told you I would be respectful of the time. At this point, your work with individuals, I just caught it because you had said it, but I didn't really catch it. So you coach people. I'm sure you do meetings like this, but you also coach people outdoors.
Yes, yeah. If they're local, that's the way to go. Sure, I do Zoom meetings as well, but yeah.
Because I've never heard of a coach that's like, hey, let's go for a hike.
Yes, yeah,
that's unique.
It's fun too.
No, it's because you're outdoors. The health, the air, the workout, and it's like everything. You're knocking out the physical with the emotional and the spiritual.
Yep. Holistic. You're totally right.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to call you for a hike.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I'm game. Let's
do it. And we've been in California. We had some really good hikes. And I haven't found a lot of good hikes here in Austin yet. So maybe you can help us.
Spots, yeah.
Yes. So now at this point, somebody wants to get a hold of you. Somebody's like, man, you know what? I really connected. I really need some help. Is there a specialty that you specialize in coaching and mentoring people? Like, is it general success coaching? Is it general life coaching? Is it business coaching? Mm-hmm. What would you say you specialize in?
Leadership coaching.
Okay.
With the understanding that the best leaders are the best humans, quite frankly. And so
you said the best leaders are the best humans.
Are the ones that really work on their whole self. So it's not tips, tricks, and techniques for leadership hacks. It's about who you are as a person. The people I work with mostly are mid-career. They've known a level of success, and they do recognize that their next level is not about a better conference, a better tip, a better trick. It's going to be going deeper with who they are and what they're really about. Often they're at an inflection point, like, do I want to keep doing what I'm doing, or is it time to risk something else? Sometimes they're pretty tired, quite frankly, and that tiredness is a sign. whether they see it that way or not. And so often it's at an inflection point that I'm coaching someone, but not always.
It's interesting. So you coach people where you were.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I don't know
makes
that
a
we
lot of
can
sense.
lead or coach people where we haven't been.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What is that tired a sign of? It's that may be a longer conversation. You're like, and oftentimes that's a sign, and you said that a second ago.
That, for instance, we might be showing up more and more out of a sense of duty and not delight.
Okay.
We have to. We're supposed to. Everyone says we're supposed to. Society says I'm supposed to like this job. It's a good job. Supposed to, should. But the exhaustion is a sign. It's the soul knocking and letting through the body's tiredness to say, hey, something else.
That's so good. We coach, we do things out of, what did you say?
Duty. Should.
Versus delight. Yeah. You got these powerful phrases.
Yeah.
You do, Bobby. Okay. Can you share as we close? Man, I wish we had more time. Can you share one of your stories with us from this book that's impactful, that maybe...
Yeah. Small stories about big things. You know, one of my favorite ones, I think it's chapter 3, is Did you know you're in a jazz band? ? And it's from my days in college when I first tried a jazz band out when I was a trumpet player. And I was a good trumpet player because I played the notes on the page just like they were written. And I played them well. Like I was like usually the solo guy or something for the marching band. And I get to a jazz band and they say, okay, everyone in the trumpet section, we're going to give you some space to riff on the music here with a little improv. And I remember my first time playing the improv, or being invited to play the improv, the music, or the time arrives and I just freeze. No notes come through the trumpet because they're not on the paper. Like, I'm like, what do you do? And I just sort of freaked because I needed it to be perfect. I need to play the notes on the paper. And what I tell this story in there, and I say, isn't that just like life? A lot of us grow up believing if we just play all the notes on the paper, we'll be successful and good and right. If we go live in the right neighborhood and go to the right schools and marry the right person and have 2.5 kids and whatever it is, and get this kind of job, then we've played all the right notes and we're successful. And then I say, but then something happens where some part of the note, the music isn't there. You lose the job. You lose everything. A pandemic happens. An illness happens. Something happens, and now there are not notes on the page. And now you've got to risk improv. And I talk in that story what it's like to risk through the fear, not around the fear, but through the fear, improv. Because it turns out when you do that, when you receive the invitation to improv, that's your best music coming forward. And what's the other cool thing about when you start improving on life and you realize that's the thing, you learn there are other people out there already doing it too. And you're part of a band of people who've learned it's not about playing the right notes, just like we're all should and supposed to. This is success. Oh, there are people out there that are living from a different place, that are riffing on the improv. I would say as a pastor, people who are letting the Holy Spirit kind of draw them forward. But yeah, that's one of my favorite stories.
What a great story, man.
So,
what a great story. I relate to that. I think everybody does to some degree. And there's this great quote that says, or this great phrase that says, you will never be a better copy of somebody else, but you'll never be a better original than yourself.
Yes.
That concept. So
there, that's it.
But that's a great story. I like playing the notes, but you feel most alive when you're like writing the notes or when you're recreating, when you're being creative. Bobby, thanks for being on. We'll put your contact information in the podcast and all your sites or contact info. Really appreciate you sharing. Looking forward to the book. Looking forward to teaching out of some of these stories to our guys, and then maybe we'll do like a part 2 when we're hiking.
I love it.
Yeah,
George, this was a blast.
Thanks for being on, bro.
Thank you.
Yes, appreciate you, man. So, guys, I hope you got some value. Maybe you're in a season of transition for yourself. Maybe you can relate to some of these topics. If it spoke to your soul, then then maybe that's God talking to you for you to go a little bit deeper. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.